Something is happening to Lewis Hamilton right now that has never happened to him before in 20 years of Formula One, and it is not about pace, it is not about the car, it is about penalties, 4 of them, in just 3 race weekends, and by the time you finish watching this video, you are going to understand exactly why half the paddock thinks the FIA has a problem with the 7-time world champion, and why the other half thinks Hamilton only has himself to blame, because what started at Spa and exploded at the Hungarian Grand Prix has turned into one of the most talked about controversies of the entire 2026 season, and it could be the difference between Lewis Hamilton fighting for an 8th world title and watching Kimi Antonelli drive away with it. So let's start from the beginning, because this story does not start in Budapest. It starts a few race weekends earlier at Spa-Francorchamps, where Hamilton was involved in a collision incident with George Russell that immediately put him under the FIA's microscope. And if you know anything about how stewards operate in this sport, you know that once you are on their radar, every single lap you drive afterward gets scrutinized just a little bit harder. And that is exactly what happened next, because when the paddock arrived in Hungary for round 11 of the championship, Hamilton was flying. He was fighting Lando Norris for a record 10th pole position at the Hungaroring, a track where downforce and tire management matter more than raw power, a track that suited the SF26 perfectly, and Hamilton put together a stunning first Q3 lap that had him provisionally on top, but then Ferrari made a decision that would haunt the entire weekend. They sent him out first for the final runs in Q3, and Hamilton himself later admitted on the record that he did not understand that call. In his own words, he said it was, quote, "a bit of a shock to me." And he added that he definitely would not have chosen to go out first, but the team made the call and he trusted it. And on that final lap, something went wrong. He had what he described as a snap at turn 1, lost a 10th instantly, and the mistake cascaded through the rest of the lap, and Norris beat him to pole by a brutal, razor-thin, gut-wrenching 0.012 seconds. 12 thousandths of a second standing between Hamilton and a piece of Formula One history, but that heartbreak was only the beginning, because during that very same Q3 session, Hamilton found himself on a slow outlap, right in the path of Oscar Piastri's McLaren at turn 1, the corner now officially known as PK Corner, and Piastri, who was setting up his own final flying lap, ran straight into traffic, and over team radio the Australian driver did not hold back. He said, quote, and gestured angrily at Hamilton's Ferrari as he passed, and within minutes the FIA stewards announced a full investigation, summoning both Hamilton and Piastri, along with representatives from Ferrari and McLaren, to appear before them at 6 o'clock local time in Budapest. And when the verdict came down, it was brutal. A 3-place grid penalty for unnecessarily impeding another driver, which meant Hamilton's stunning lap, the one that had him fighting for pole, was completely wiped out in terms of grid position, dropping him from 2nd all the way down to 5th on the starting grid before the race had even begun. And let that sink in for a second. This is a driver who set one of the fastest laps of the weekend, who was within touching distance of history, and instead of starting on the front row, he was starting from 5th because of an impeding call, and that alone would have been enough controversy for one weekend. But the FIA was not done with Lewis Hamilton yet, because during the race itself, under a virtual safety car period, Ferrari made the call to bring Hamilton in for a pit stop, switching him off his aging hard tires and onto a fresh set of softs so he could hunt down Max Verstappen and race leader Lando Norris in the closing laps. And here is where it gets messy, because when Hamilton exited the pit lane, he found himself ahead of Mercedes driver Kimi Antonelli, his own championship rival, despite the virtual safety car conditions that were supposed to freeze the field, and Ferrari, terrified of a penalty, immediately radioed him to hand the position straight back, which he did, giving up track position he had legitimately gained in an attempt to stay clean with the stewards. But even that sacrifice was not enough, because later in the race, the FIA stewards reviewed his pit lane exit speed and found that Hamilton had been clocked at exactly 80.1 kilometers per hour, that is 0.1 kilometers per hour, 1/10 of a single kilometer per hour, over the pit lane speed limit, and for that microscopic infringement, he was hit with a 5-second time penalty, a penalty that dropped him from a hard-fought fourth-place finish all the way down to fifth, and this is the moment where even neutral observers started raising their eyebrows, because Sky Sports F1 pundit and former F1 driver Anthony Davidson sat down with the actual onboard footage, frame by frame, trying to understand where exactly Hamilton had broken the limit, and even he, a professional analyst with access to every camera angle, came away completely baffled, saying on air, quote, "I can't work out why he gets a penalty, and if a trained expert cannot explain a penalty after reviewing the footage, you have to ask yourself what is actually going on here." And Hamilton himself did not stay quiet about any of this. Over team radio, in real time, with the whole world listening, he said to his race engineer Carlo Santi, quote, "handing out penalties like crazy," and after the race, still clearly frustrated, he doubled down, telling his team, quote, "every opportunity that I give those stewards, every single time they give me a penalty." And when he spoke to the media afterward, he described his weekend in blunt, exhausted terms, calling it, quote, "pretty bad, pretty frustrating, and here is the number that should stop you in your tracks. 4 penalties in 3 consecutive race weekends for a 7-time world champion who has driven in this sport for 2 decades and built a reputation as one of the cleanest, most tactically intelligent drivers on the grid. So naturally, the question everyone in the paddock is now whispering is simple. Is this a coincidence? Or is the FIA holding Lewis Hamilton to a different standard than everyone else on the grid? And honestly, the fair answer is that it is complicated. Because on one side, once a driver is flagged early in a weekend, like Hamilton was after the Spa incident, stewards genuinely do watch that driver more closely for the rest of the event. That is simply how the sport works. Scrutiny compounds, and once you are on their radar, every marginal call tends to go against you rather than for you. And on top of that, Hamilton's own team has to shoulder some of the blame here too, because it was Ferrari's strategy call to send him out first in qualifying that arguably cost him pole position, and it was Ferrari's decision to pit him under that virtual safety car in the first place. A decision Hamilton later admitted, quote, "I would never have stopped," suggesting that if Ferrari had left him out, he might have held on to second or even challenged for the win. So some of this frustration is not really about the FIA being biased, it is about a team still finding its rhythm with a newish driver pairing in a title fight, but on the other side of the argument, 4 penalties in 3 race weekends, including one for 1/100th of a kilometer per hour, one so small that an experienced professional analyst could not spot the infraction on camera, is the kind of statistic that fuels serious suspicion, and it is worth remembering the wider context here too. This is happening while Hamilton is genuinely fighting for the championship, sitting second in the standings, and every point matters, every position matters, and every penalty at this stage of the season does not just cost him a few positions on a Sunday, it chips away at his title hopes race after race after race. And the timing could not be worse. Because right after Hungary, Formula One entered its mandatory summer break. Factories shut down for 2 weeks under strict FIA monitoring. No upgrades, no development, nothing. Which means Hamilton and Ferrari now have 2 full weeks to sit with this frustration, to review the tapes, to talk to the stewards, to figure out how to stop bleeding points to Kimi Antonelli, who has now extended his championship lead to 50 points after Hungary. 50 points, that is a gap that is starting to look less like a close title fight and more like a runaway. And if Hamilton cannot solve this penalty problem the moment racing resumes at Zandvoort, this small crack in his season could turn into the story that defines his entire championship bid. So here is what we want to know from you, and I mean this genuinely. Do you think the FIA stewards are being unfair to Lewis Hamilton? Do you think this is scrutiny that comes from being a flag driver after Spa? Or do you think Ferrari's strategy calls are the real problem here and Hamilton is just an easy target for criticism because of his history and profile? Drop your take in the comments below right now. I read every single one of them, and if you want to stay ahead of every twist in this title fight, the driver clashes, the team radio meltdowns, the stewards' decisions, before anyone else is talking about them, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because trust me, after the summer break, when the cars roll out at Zandvoort, This Hamilton penalty saga is going to be the first story everyone is watching, and we will be here breaking it down before anybody else. So like this video if you want more of this kind of deep dive, share it with a fellow F1 fan who needs to see this, and I will see you in the next one.